Okay, thanks for joining today. I know July's a tough month. I'm not sure we're going to have a huge number of people. Many people are happily away on holiday. But in a way, it's nice if there's fewer of you. Feel free to ask questions, either in the chat, well, ideally in the Q&A, but also in the chat. And let me know if there's anything specific you would like me to cover. I have got slides, obviously, which I will go through, but I can add in other things if anyone has something they're specifically interested in hearing about. A little bit of housekeeping. As you know, I've just clicked record. So this is being recorded. Everybody who registered will receive a link to the recording and these slides. So if you want to look back at anything, you'll be able to do that later on. Closed captioning should be enabled. So if you want to have captions, because I'm not very clear, feel free to turn them on, or if language is difficult or hearing is difficult, do make use of those. There will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end, but as I just said, let's be flexible. If you have something during, pop it in. If I spot it on my second monitor while I'm talking, I'll try and address then and there. I'm assuming you've already found the link to the webinars page because you've signed up, but keep an eye. We offer different ones here and there. Equally, though, you could sign up for a demo if you want hands-on specific support with something that you're trying to do. So feel free to do those. If you pick a UK time, that will normally be me that's giving those demos this time, but we offer them at across different time zones too. Okay, so what I will cover today is a variety of things around why sharing methods matters. I think I'm getting my tongue twisted. Why sharing methods matters. And also then obviously introduction to protocols.io and how to use it, with plenty of time for questions. So I'll start at the beginning. So why is it important to share your methods? So I'm assuming you're all researchers or have an interest in research one way or another. And something that has perhaps gone unappreciated. There's been a lot of focus on sharing papers and data and code. There has not been as much focus on availability of methods. And as you can see from these tweets, something that happens quite frequently is that you would look for either a protocol or how something was created in a published research paper. And you often end up on a citation chain, or kind of a wild goose chase, where each paper cites another earlier paper. And maybe it bounces you eventually all the way back to an early paper that's paywalled. Perhaps it's paper only. Maybe very difficult for you to actually source that paper. Or in this case of a physicist where devices were fabricated as previously described, the original article actually just said devices were fabricated with conventional methods. So we actually have no information about what happened, how experiments were performed, or how things were fabricated. And researchers can't find, access, or replicate the experimental methodological details. Sorry, that gif's really annoying after a while, but it illustrates the frustration that many researchers will have when they hit this block. There is a very interesting project initiative that was undertaken quite a little while back now, the Cancer Biology Reproducibility Project. This was undertaken by the Center for Open Science and Science Exchange in the US. They wanted to try to replicate all of the experiments from just over 50 published perceived high impact cancer research papers. And there is a very nice write-up about this in The Atlantic by Ed Yong that I've got an excerpt from on the left. But just before I say that, this initiative, they looked at the published papers, obviously, to see if they could see what experiments were performed and how they were performed. But they also spoke to the researchers who had done the original research. So they went a step further than just looking at the paper. They talked to the researchers themselves to get that information. So long story short, it was impossible for them to get enough information to actually perform the experiments and replicate, reproduce what was done in those papers, those perceived high impact, important papers about cancer research. So that excerpt, the hardest part by far was figuring out exactly what the original labs actually did. Scientific papers come with method sections that ought to provide recipes for doing the same experiments, but often those recipes are incomplete, missing out important steps, details, or ingredients, and in some cases, the recipes aren't described at all. Researchers simply cite an earlier study that used a similar technique. So we have a big problem. And what happened is that as they attempted to do these 50 papers, after trying just 18, they decided that they needed to stop this initiative. It wasn't working. It was too time and money expensive to attempt to replicate those experiments. Basically, it wasn't possible to do it. And in a more recent write-up that's actually on the Centre for Open Science's website here, they even note that from 53 papers, 193 experiments, 0% of protocols were completely described. So it's more than just kind of not having the information in the paper. Because the researchers also couldn't produce that information, it's also about how the information is being tracked and recorded at all by researchers as they perform research. So I like to illustrate this with cookies while we're virtual still for some things like webinars. So this image of cookies have all been baked using the same recipe, but the recipe has been tweaked slightly each time. So it came from a magazine that I happened upon a while back. So if these cookies, if we imagine they're the data that you're generating in your research, they are phenotypically, obviously, physically very different from one another. Probably more than just in how they look, also in how they taste and the texture and the brittleness, all of those elements, and flavor, of course, will be different depending on the tweak that happened and how they actually physically then came out of the oven. But of course, we can only interpret and understand exactly what has happened to either enhance the flavor, make it chewy, make it brittle. We can only understand that and interpret that if we know what the change was that was made to the recipe, to the method. So this is just an indicator that, you know, as you're generating lots of research in the lab and you're maybe tweaking things, you do need to know and track very carefully what the tweaks are in order to understand and replicate and be able to build upon the research and for others to replicate that later on as well. Excuse me. And we do really well now sharing data. I think we've done great things, making lots of the research that we publish open access and requiring data availability statements. There are many, many repositories for data. So there's a huge ocean of data that's now available. I'm kind of curious how much of that data we have the methods for. Do we know how it was all generated? Do we actually understand exactly how the experiments were performed to generate the data? And if we don't have that methodological information, can we usefully reinterpret, really understand more again, reanalyze without knowing exactly how the data were generated at a later date? So the value of the data that you're sharing, I think, goes hand in hand with the need for the methods to be shared too. So there's a nice quote I like to use here. It's an evolutionary biologist, Dobzhansky. He said nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, but I switched that up to nothing in research data makes sense except in the light of how it was generated. So it's important for kind of longevity over time. It's also important for your own research practices too. And that's where I'll now introduce you to protocols.io as well. Just kind of keep an eye on time. So protocols.io is a tool, an online tool, kind of has two parts to it. On the one side, it's for your private content, the methods that you're working on, you're developing, you're optimizing, you're tweaking, and it allows you to keep a track of all the tweaks that you make and have a record that you can then correlate with any data that you generate. So that should allow you to see tweak to recipe resulting cookie very easily over time. So that's that private side. The public side is when you're ready, you can publish those protocols, kind of post them. It's analogous to a preprint server in that they're not peer reviewed at that level. You can incorporate them into a research paper and have them be peer reviewed within the context of a research paper. But independently, you can post and make available your protocols on protocols.io. And when you do, they are always open access. So they're always under a CC BY license. So on that side, it's also a repository of information that others have shared about the methods that they're using. So it's also a place where you can come and look for methods to get a start to understand how other people are performing those methods. And if you like what they've done, you can borrow it, make your own copy. We call it a fork, so you know it came from theirs, and then you can build upon it and make your own amendments to that. So the overall mission is to make it easy to share method details before, during, and after publication. If you haven't looked at it, this is kind of a snippet of the homepage, which you can get to very easily from this protocols.io/welcome URL. This is, I kind of copy pasted a bit, so it doesn't look exactly like this, but it gives you a feel for what it looks like. If you haven't made an account, this is the place where you can make an account too, or sign in if you haven't signed in. But if you scroll down on this page, you'll find some example protocols to look at. You can click through to see some more information, and just generally browse before you actually start using if you want to. That's a good place to start. The protocols that get added then and everything that goes on there, if people have heard of the FAIR approach, which is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible. And we like to think that we actually achieve that quite well with protocols.io. So content is indexed, it's accessible, it's available, and there is CC BY license. The interoperability, we have an API, we have some ability to export and import with some other tools I'll show in a bit. And of course, the DOI, if you publish, you get a digital object identifier, which is a very commonly used persistent identifier for content that's published. So any research paper will also have a DOI. And so they can all be linked to very easily. So everything's interoperable. And then reproducible, I mean, this is where I think we do better than most. And I'll show some places where you can track that on protocols.io. There's a lot of users using the platform globally, well over 180,000, over 18,000 published protocols. So those are ones that you could come and look through. They're all available. There is likely to be content that would be of use to you to understand how other people have done something. And then there's a lot of private content. So it tends to track about 4-fold more private protocol content than public. And that's people using that private side to develop, optimize, tweak. Sometimes it might be more kind of just generic lab buffer recipes or protocols and things that get used a lot but aren't going to be published as well. It's a good place to keep all of that core content on protocols.io. Just to illustrate how, if you are using protocols.io, it can become a very central part of the entire research workflow. It takes time probably to adopt it to be part of the day-to-day, but an investment in doing that is probably very valuable in the long run. So if we imagine that initially, when we're starting a new research project, kind of define the question, hypotheses, think about and investigate what you want to do and start planning. Maybe there's content on protocols.io that will be useful for this. So you can see what's available already. If you've been using it a long time, maybe you've already got some of your own content on here that you're going to build upon. As you go around, you'll plan the experiments, identify protocols, equipment, materials, put all of that information onto protocols.io, and then start adding all of the information about the protocols on there. The beauty of it is it works very much like a Google Drive or a Teams space where you can share and collaboratively edit with colleagues. So you can be seeking and getting feedback using commenting as well. So, you can have your colleagues can have ability to edit the protocols, perhaps if you want to be working on it really with them. Or if you're a student in the lab and you just want your group leader to have access and give you feedback using comments, they can do it that way as well. Then you can kind of respond and iterate like you would any kind of other document. The difference being that this is a platform that captures any kind of step-by-step method. And then we have this really nice run functionality that allows you to step through and actually tick off all of the steps of the protocol, add comments, maybe tweak variables and make changes on the fly during an individual run. And then you can record that run. So you can record anything that happened that day when you're running through the protocol. That way you have, as we said before, a record of what you did that will correlate with the data. Chances are you might end up here tweaking. Things didn't work quite as well as you wanted them to. The results not very clear. We maybe want to keep trying, tweaking, rerunning and analyzing and optimizing. And so I think probably many researchers are looping here for quite a long time before they actually have got the method working reproducibly in a robust way that's actually getting the information that they want. So this is where we have this record every run, comments, details of what works, what doesn't work. You capture every time you've made a change to the recipe. And then finally, you have hopefully eventually a successful protocol. The experiments are working, you perform the research, analyze the research, and you writing it up. So what's amazing and really helpful at this point, and kind of is part of the big efficiency of using it all the time, is that at this stage, you should have the record of the working functional protocol as you have finalized it and optimized it. And it's very, very easy to publish that, obtain the DOI, which I mentioned earlier, that persistent identifier, and then you can link to that and cite it from your research manuscript. You have basically written a large part of the materials and methods for your paper without needing to type anything into the document of the actual research paper. You can just link across to it and give a very brief précis in the paper and link to the comprehensive version on protocols.io. All journals, we've never heard of a journal not be happy with that as a way of putting in a comprehensive reproducible method into the paper. So this is an example where it's a PLOS biology paper, quite a kind of bit old now, 2017, but you can see this is how you do this in the materials and methods. They say methods and protocols for, and it's the whole set of different experiments are available as a collection in protocols.io, and then they have that DOI link. So when you click that DOI link, it brings you to the version here that was posted on protocols.io. So protocols.io as well, this is a collection. You can add individual protocols, but you can also make a collection which contains multiple, and that's what the authors have done here. So they pulled in several experiments into one collection. But the beauty of protocols.io too is that if you realize you made a mistake, which does happen, or if you realize something could have been written much more clearly, or if eventually you further optimize the protocol, you can make a new version on protocols.io. And if you land on the version that was posted at this stage here, that DOI, it will always bring you to the same version, version 1 here, that was published at the same time. But you'll be told if there's a newer version of the protocol available, or protocol collection in this instance, and you can click to view that. And if you want, you can compare back. So you'll be able to see for an individual protocol if it was updated or not. But it also means that science or research is very rarely a one and done situation. Often you'll be continually optimizing even afterwards. So it allows you to continue dynamically to evolve your methods and keep track on the platform. So I mentioned we've never heard of a journal say, no, you can't post your methods on protocols.io. In fact, many, many journals and publishers have written in their instructions to authors, recommendation to include methods on protocols.io in the instructions to authors. When you just put the link across to the DOI, it's not necessarily a formal integration with us. It's just a way of modularly having paper and research in the same, research method in the same way that you might have paper and data in a data repository. You know, they're just modules of the research output that you can interlink together. We do, however, have some more specific tie-ins with some journals. where they really are pushing for you to have the methods on protocols.io. The most built out of these is the PLOS One Lab protocol integration that we have. They created a specific article type, I'll show you in a minute, that requires methods be on protocols.io. Really allows you to get a paper when you've got the protocol, because you can just kind of add the peripheral parts of the paper around the protocol, submit that to PLOS One, as long as it's a protocol that will still be of interest. But we also now have BMC methods, nature protocols, lab animal. We anticipate this list to continue to grow. And when you have them in there, they will, we assume, be overseeing review of the protocol at the same time as they review the manuscript. We will have more integrations coming into some submission systems soon, but they're not there just yet. But when we know about these, we will also add a peer-reviewed method badge to the protocol. So for those more formally integrated any of those journals on the previous page, we make sure to recognize that the protocol is peer-reviewed as well as the paper. So this just shows you that PLOS One lab protocol article type, where I said they require the method be on protocols.io. Has a very prominent see the protocol button at the top, and we also capture the PLOS One citation or whatever journal citation it might be, so they're really nicely bidirectionally linked. And again, it has that note in the methods that the protocol is published on protocols.io. Here's the DOI, blah blah blah. You can also have a citation to the protocol as well in the references. So why do we care about splitting out the method from the paper? It actually facilitates a lot of really interesting connections that wouldn't necessarily occur if you only had the paper. So this is a nice example of that, where on the left, a researcher was looking for someone with experience of RNA extraction from primary cortical neuron cultures. Sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat today. So for kind of brain cells, essentially. After a few other tweets, Elena there, who is a postdoc from UCSF, suggested a protocol on protocols.io. RNA extraction protocol, lovely, sounds exactly what it should be, what's needed. But when we looked at this protocol, it turns out it's included in a paper that had been published on GigaScience, and it was a paper looking at a three-spine stickleback parasite, so a fish parasite. So it's very unlikely that these researchers would have found the method from this paper if it did not exist independently as a protocol on protocols.io. So what we do is we're kind of recognizing and realizing the value of the method as a standalone output from a research perspective, which can be very distinctly useful from the research paper itself. So this increases discoverability, reproducibility, obviously, because we've got that, but also just facilitates these lovely research connections, enables reuse, and enhances the value of research. If we just had the paper, I don't think many people would have looked at it for an RNA extraction protocol. So it's really interesting to see how those connections are made. So yeah, hopefully persuading you that there's big benefits to managing and sharing research data on protocols. Because of the collaborative way that you can keep all of your content in one place within a lab or within a collaboration or a specific project, it can actually really simplify teamwork and improve collaboration. And because you can track everything and keep iterating and versioning without having to start things from scratch, it's a big time saver and can help with keeping work organized. Okay, so now we'll look at protocols.io too. So I'll stick with slides just in the interests of time rather than a live demo. I do suggest anyone sign up for a one-to-one demo if they really want to kind of look at using the platform more that way. So as I said, it's one side of it is as a public repository. So you can look for public published content. So on that protocols.io welcome page, which I mentioned earlier, there is a search bar. So if you're wanting to just come and get started, you can come and search for a term of interest. So I just did a basic PCR and it pulled me up category publications and will list me as kind of our algorithm determines sorting by relevance, different published available protocols on the platform that have that term in them. And you can see it appears in the title, appears in keywords, tells you how it matched PCR in this instance. So that's a good way to look for potentially interesting protocols. But you can also, if you're searching for a keyword or looking for a person, you can toggle under that publications and search workspaces or people or et cetera, and look for information that way. So there are different ways to search on there. If you find one that you like, you can directly run it. If you think it's plug and play for you to use that method in your research, you can directly run it and save the run records in your own space. Equally valuable, perhaps more so, is the ability to fork. So the fork, I alluded to it earlier, allows you to make a carbon copy of that protocol. It will show the lineage that it forked from it, but it will be private and it will sit wherever you determine in your space, and you'll be able to edit it. So if you think, oh, that top one here, I could use this, but I'm going to be using it and applying it to some other kind of organoid. So I'm going to need to make some adaptations. Then you can make that fork and then edit it for yourself, change the author list, make it work so that it will work to you. Because it shows the lineage, it's always giving attribution back to the original protocol. You can also do this on your own protocols, the fork. So if you've got things that you adapt because they're permutations of similar protocols in your own research, once you've got one on, you can make your own versions, again, forks, copies of those protocols to make changes to. If you look under workspaces, sometimes there's some really nice public workspaces. So I've got that organoid and assembloid is another example I've picked up here. Some of them are public and you can just join them if you want to. And when you join them, you'll be able to interact with the other members of that workspace, discussions, see the content a little bit more, and put some of your content on this. If you're working in that subject area, maybe if you publish some protocols, you want them to show on this public workspace just for findability. Sign up for an account. So as I said, that's that protocols.io welcome. There's the option to sign up if you don't have an account already. You may be at an institution that has a license. If you want to check if your institution has a license, this link here, protocols.io/institutions, partway down the page has a drop down that lists all of the publicly, mostly academic institutions that have accounts. So you can have a look there to see if you do or not. If you do, you may be able to sign on with SSO. If not, there's lots of other options. You can have a basic free account without having an institutional license. It will just have a bit more limited functionality. But if you're interested in your institution getting a license, then you should get in touch with us. So this is what you get really with those. So the basic free account will limit you to 2 private protocols. But you can publish them for free, post them for free, and have the public workspaces or public versions and forks. But you'll still get all of the same preservation security features, really, and basic support from us. Individually, you can sign up just for one premium workspace. It's possible to pay for your own premium workspace. You would be charged per user in that workspace. Per month, or you can do it annually, and then you would be able to have an unlimited number of private protocols in that space, and a bit more maybe training and dedicated support. But the easiest is the institutional license, which very quickly works out to be cheapest per user as well, and then it's unlimited private protocols on unlimited workspaces. There's an import service, can have single sign-on and training webinars, etc., etc. So when you're using protocols.io, there is 3 views essentially that you'll come across. The file manager, which is exactly what it sounds like, the location where you store all of the content. It's kind of the back end view of protocols.io. You can organize in folders, have all your files here, move things around. If you have more than one workspace, they will appear on the left-hand side here. If you're creating a protocol, you will end up in the editor. So the editor is, I'll show you again in a minute, has lots of lovely functionality and is created as a template to capture any kind of step-by-step method. When you're in there, you can toggle between the editor and the viewer. So you can kind of continually edit and then see what it looks like. So you can go back and forth between those seamlessly. So I mentioned you can have more than one workspace. You can go between them over here, but each workspace, as well as having a file manager view for the content that's in it, has a profile view where you can see more who the other team members are, create discussions, other things like that, see all the published content, etc. And you can also configure whether these are publicly visible, like those ones I showed you before that are publicly available. You can look at them, anyone can look at them, or you can make them invisible. They won't show up in searches, but you can share them behind the scenes. So if you've got one for your lab, for example, and you don't want it to be public, you can all have access without the rest of the world knowing about it. So here's that. This is the file manager, which I mentioned. You can create any kind of folders that you want, whatever structure you want, drag and drop files around in here. You can dump PDFs if you've been working on protocols or you've got them all in some other format. You can dump all the files in here and then eventually organize them. But within that workspace, you can have all of the members of the team can be members, so they can all access and see what's in here. So it's a great way of kind of centrally putting everything together. And you can see on the left, lots of different workspaces, so I could navigate between different ones that I'm a member of. Most people wouldn't end up with that many. There are, when you click on any of the things, there's a few options that come up, including export, which allows you to connect to apps and export content to various different external drives. Lots of other functionality I won't get to delving in. But that was the file manager view of a workspace. This is the profile view of a workspace. So this is a coronavirus method development community. This is a big public one as well. So if you wanted to come and poke around, you'd be able to join this one. And on that profile view, I said you'll be able to see who all the members are. You can see all of the public available protocols that are here. If there have been discussions, that will also show comments on protocols, resources, news, etc. So each workspace will have an administrator. They can change all the permissions and they can decide whether it's public or private and change that at a later date as well. And this is just a hub, really. So if you're either in your lab or for a project or for a bigger initiative, like this is something we opened up during the pandemic, it's a place for people to come and communicate with one another about the methods that they're developing. So here it was actually very helpful for people to share methods for sequencing, viral detection, etc., etc. So when you're in there in the workspace, I said you can navigate between each. On the left-hand side, the different workspaces, there's a little tiny caret, sometimes a bit hard to see. And if you click that out, it expands out. And you can go between the folder and the profile over here too, but you can also access the administration, a task manager. You can create a library of reagents. There's all sorts of things in here. There's too much for me to go into in detail on this webinar, but this will be the profile and the file manager. So you can kind of go backwards and forwards between them very easily from the left-hand side. There's administration, as I mentioned. Every workspace will have an admin where you can change and kind of control who the members are, what privileges they have, what rights they have. Lots and lots of things here that you can actually do. Again, it's too much really to go into too much detail. I would encourage you to play around if you are using protocols that I own. Have a look what's in there. There's tons of stuff that you can do. So, but when you click down to advanced options, where were we? Oh, I think it comes a bit lower down on this page. If you're clicking on the workspace settings, there's advanced options, and that will open up here. That's where you can, workspaces will be private initially by default. If you want a public one for your project or for your lab, you can change it to be public here. You can control how people are members. So by invitation only, you want to say this is only going to be open to the people in my lab that I want to invite. That's how you can do that here. You can generate a link so that they can follow the link to join, or you can actually trigger an email to invite them specifically as well. So there's lots of different ways of doing this. And yeah, configure all of the permissions. Okay, jump back. This on the left again, we're back in that file manager view. On the top right of that, there is a new button. So here's where you can click to create a new protocol or a collection. Like I said, you can gather a group of different protocols into one collection. So when you've made your protocols, you can then do the collection and pull them all into it. And if you click new protocol, it will ask you where you want to create it within your workspace. And then you click continue, and it will open you up a bare template protocol within what now we're in the editor view. So this is the editor of the protocol. Sorry, I can just see one question, so I'll quickly have a look. How many private workspaces can you have with the free version? How many private protocols per private workspace? I think you can have a couple of workspaces, but you're only going to be allowed 2 private files in total. So it's very, very limiting in that capacity. There are some ways of inviting colleague to get an extra protocol, but there's separate. If you have another colleague sign up and join that workspace, it does not mean that that workspace will suddenly have 4 private files. It will only have 2 still. So it may get you 1 more if they join in that way. There's a way of getting 1 extra one, but it won't get there. It will max out quite quickly, so it is a bit limiting. Okay, so the editor. So yeah, this is tailor-made to capture step-by-step methods. I'll talk through the different parts because it looks like there's a lot on the page. On the left-hand side, these are tools for the protocol steps, etc. So there's kind of insert a section or a step. You can do that clicking new as well. But you can delete things. There's other bits and bobs you can do there. At the very top, we have these steps, description, guidelines and warnings, references. These are tabs for relevant information. So if you click through those, you'll see there's boxes designed to capture various points of information. There's a standard sort of toolbar for formatting things, adding links, images, videos, bolding, justification, including adding a table, bullets, etc. And then on the very right-hand side, there's additional functionality that's specific again to protocols.io. So let me go through a bit further. So with that on the right-hand side, the top one, these are components. If you click that, it will open you out this list of components. They are to capture variables within a step. So many of them will be wet lab related, but there are some that are computational pipeline, kind of software data set command. But if you're kind of wet lab, then you can capture amounts, define what a sample is, temperatures, concentrations, put timers in there. So they allow you to format the text this way. I said earlier that you can collaboratively edit. So like a Google Doc or something, if more than one person was in here, you would see their avatar up here at the same time. So we could be editing at the same time, but not to worry too much if they come in and make changes you don't like, because you can also see the history and see who made what changes when, and go back through things. That's a little bit more limited if you only have a free account again, but if you have a paid account, you can go all the way back. If you do only have a free account and something goes terribly wrong and you want to roll back and you can't see it on there, you can contact us. There are ways, but we'd rather not be doing that in an ad hoc way all the time. Can generate color coding for sections. So earlier on you saw on the left, it said new section. If you click here, it will be a new step, new section, and you just give it a title. And when you generate those new sections, they create these color-coded parts. And as that gets built out for a complicated protocol, it also auto-generates a table of contents that you can use to navigate. So if this was pages and pages long, I could jump down to a section. It would take me straight there. There's a nice completion status just to track what you've done. We try and recommend the things you should add to make sure it's a fully complete protocol. And of course, all of them have this lovely step-by-step format. That's really what's very specific. So I'll run through quickly a couple of examples of what you can do if you've got existing protocols that you've got in some other format and you want to get them onto protocols.io. So we have a really nice way for you to kind of do a copy paste fudge and then insert the steps from text. So that left hand toolbar series of options, there is one button that's insert steps from text. And if you click that, it will bring you up this view here. So you can paste in the information and I got, if it will play, a short movie that just walks through how that works and what that looks like. So left-hand side, insert steps from text. And you've got either each number is a step, each line is a step, various different things. So presupposing you've got a protocol, maybe in a Google Doc or a Word document with the steps. So in this case, there are steps 1 through 16. Copy those out and go back. Make sure you've got the right one selected, but for this one, it was each number is a step. Paste them in. I tend to do paste and match style just in case there's tagging if it's a Word doc or something. You'll do a preview and it will show you how it's pulled in those 1 through 16 and then import, and they will all be added into the protocol here like that. So then they're all in. It will not format any of the variables like amounts or times. So if you want to do that, you'll have to go back in afterwards and add that information separately. We always suggest including as much information as possible. There were those other tabs. So description under there's like abstract, keywords, links, manuscript citation, disclaimer if needed, funders. You can add an attachment if you need. Guidelines and warnings has guidelines and warnings. If there's before start information, if ethics should be needed, sensitive content warning if you've got gory images of any kind of animals or humans even, or anything like that, you can put a sensitive content warning. Note that if you don't and you publish it and we spot it, we might add one over the top. That's not many things we can change. References and materials. So if you do add in reagents and things using the components, they will automatically be added to materials. If you do add any references into the protocol itself using the protocol component, they will automatically be added here, but you can equally come and just type in here if you want to. One of the ways that this is much better than the methods section of a paper is that you can include more images or videos to really illustrate how to do things. So that top toolbar either has insert image video. That's good if it's a small video that you've taken on your phone, but not too big. If you have a larger video, we suggest embed media, and you would need to upload the video somewhere like YouTube or Vimeo first, and then from that location, so this example is YouTube, if you click share and then embed, you can copy the embed code from that and paste it into embed media here on protocols.io, and it will pull the videos into the protocol step where you've chosen. I mentioned earlier connect apps. So there's this export option. We have some nice integrations with some electronic lab notebooks, but we also have the ability to set up so that you export things to a drive of your location, whatever it is that you might be working with, Dropbox Drive, Box, OneDrive, OSF. Lab Archives here is an electronic lab notebook. So if you do use that, you can configure this to directly push protocols or protocol run records out to your electronic lab notebook. We do also, or there are also, I should say, integrations with both RSpace and Cynote, but for those two, it's a pull. So you come from that lab notebook and pull into your protocols.io and bring things out and across that way, where Lab Archives is a push from our side. They've just been built out in different ways. Sharing, posting, publishing. So when you're creating a protocol, if you're in the lab manager and you click on one, the folder view, you click on a protocol, you'll see share on the right hand side. But if you're viewing a protocol or editing a protocol, you will always see share. Share would appear under more, or there's also publish, reserve DOI. All of these options show up on all of these locations. And it's very easy to run through any of them. Share, you can add someone's email address, publishing or reserving a DOI. It's a 6-step process to run through to we nudge you to include things if you haven't, and make sure you've got co-author confirmations and so on before you click to post. If you have a premium license or an institution with a license and publish, it will go live immediately. We do check afterwards, but it's not screened. If you don't have a premium account, then it enters a screening process. So we check because we try to make sure spam or pseudoscience doesn't go through. A big benefit of protocols.io is the commenting, which I mentioned before. If you wanted to give your group leader access, they can come along and give you helpful feedback on step-by-step level like this. They post it and you can reply when you've addressed it. You can click resolve. When you publish, you can say clean off all the comments. So it's very easy to do that at that point in time. Equally, though, that commenting functionality exists on all of the published protocols on protocols.io. So in this way, users who are interested in running a protocol can come along and ask questions of the authors. The authors will be alerted that a comment has been added and they will reply. So this is one example, Stephen Henikoff, he uses it a lot. Protocols.io, he generates and develops methods, and many people come along and use his methods. And so he uses this as like a public FAQ, because otherwise he was getting many questions by email that he was answering the same questions over and over again. When there's a public record of the comments and the questions and his answers, it means he doesn't have to keep answering the same thing over and over again. There's a nice button that's one of the indicators of reproducibility is the works for me button. 9 other researchers in this instance have come along and clicked that and said, oh, this works for me. They've managed to get it to reproduce. Another way to get protocols onto protocols.io, if you already have some, is using our import service. If you're an institution with a license, you'll get this for free. If you're not, then it does have a cost associated. But it's as easy as uploading a file or giving us a link to where your protocol is, and submitting it. And we have a portal that runs through, and we have editors who have research backgrounds who will enter the protocol, double check it, and then you review it. And then ultimately we transfer the ownership back to you. You can keep it private or publish it, do whatever you want with it at that point in time. But the link to that is here. But also you can track this under your profile. So when you're in protocols.io, you might have an avatar or just a letter. If you click that, you'll be able to go to profile. And on your profile page, there's a protocol entry button here. So you can track progress of protocols you've submitted here, or also submit new ones here too. Many people use it for teaching. I'm not going to jump down that rabbit hole, but if you have one copy and many people can access it, I am going to assume that you can understand how that can be really valuable for a teacher with a large, either computational or lab class to access content on protocols.io, or to get students to add content to protocols.io. Many organizations encourage use. I mentioned earlier, journals and publishers. We're seeing more and more funders requiring or recommending using protocols.io in grant guidelines and policies, and starting to see this more. UNESCO Open Science recommendations talk about sharing methods. Science Europe has got recommendations for using protocols.io as well. And then we're getting more and more of these site licenses being the norm. I did say you can check, just a reminder really, you can check. And if you don't have the premium access and you'd be interested in having a site license, there's a note there of emailing our info email, and we can put you in touch with people who might be able to connect with others at your institution and look for support to try and get one of those licenses there for you. I'll move on to Q&A. See, there's one already in there. I'm just going to leave a key benefits slide up and I'll answer that. Are we planning any integrations with other, I assume that should be ELNs? Yes, is the short answer, but we don't have a determination of which and when. But we are constantly looking at that, and it's user driven a little bit if many people ask. It also sometimes depends on the ELN being willing to cooperate with us on that as well. But we would, yes, definitely be trying to do more. So if you have a specific one in mind that would be useful, let me know, because we can see if that's one that's already in the pipeline or not, etc. I will just talk through the key benefits, but feel free to add any other questions, and then I am really done. So after that, if you've no questions, then you can drop off. But just to reiterate, benefits, then you've got support for collaboration, increased discoverability. Remember the people working on the brain cells, looking at a method from fish parasite. The enhanced reproducibility, having your methods in this step-by-step way. It's brilliant for everyone else, but we also often say your most likely future collaborator is yourself. So either you trying to do something that you did 6 months ago, or a new group member coming in who wants to reproduce what other people have been doing over time. Research people turnover in labs. This can really mean that it's easier for a lab to consistently reproduce the research that they're doing. Facilitates reuse, can get credit and recognition for method development. The fact of posting the protocols separately from the papers, you can have different author lists for the method that way. So if one person really spent ages developing and optimizing the method, but didn't get to apply, the PhD ran out, didn't get to apply it and get the paper, they can actually get credit for the method, even if they didn't do the subsequent application somewhere. This dynamic permanence with the versioning, remember that published papers can link to a version, but you can update it over time, but that it will always stay there, that permanent record of the one that was posted before, but you can update over time. Much better materials and methods when you're using protocols.io, and overall stewardship of research output. So, from an institutional perspective, knowing that your researchers are keeping their content well. Within a lab, though, this turnover issue, or the cancer biology initiative, where people didn't have the information about how the experiments were done a few years later, this means that a lab should be able to really keep much better record of what's in there. And okay, so that's my last slide, and I see there is another question. So can you collaborate externally with the free subscription? Is the teaching aspect only possible with premium or institution subscription? That is a really good question. Can collaborate externally. If you're putting content on there and you share it with others, obviously they're going to be able to come in if they've got an account, and work on that protocol with you if you give them that permission, or just view it if you've shared it privately with them. So you can absolutely do that externally. The teaching aspect, I think, will, again, if you keep it private, you'll have your limit of 2 files. You could share the protocol with as many people as you want. So in theory, you could share it with everyone in a lab, or have it in a workspace that you give them all access to. They will not be able to make more private files, but they will be able to access the one that you give them access to. Possibly slightly easier if you publish protocols that you want to use in a teaching perspective, because then they would just be publicly available, and all of your students could have separately their own free workspace with 2 free files, rather than trying to all be in one workspace. It would have limitations. There would be ways around it. It would obviously be easier with a subscription than without. Hopefully that helps a little bit to answer the question. I don't know who asked the question, or where you're located, but if you are interested in exploring kind of licenses, do drop us an email. That info email, or one to me directly here, mine's on the screen, emma@protocols.io. There might be ways of kind of trying to get you a temporary upgrade if you work with the sales team to connect at your institution. Some institutions, depending on geographic location, we might be able to come up with options for a workspace if they're somewhere that's not as well funded. or money available kind of globally. Okay, I don't see any more questions. I'm going to turn off the recording.